On the first glance, the Hellboy Library Edition, Volume 3, is the first one with longer stories, and obviously it's true, and somehow it's not. It's not true because the short stories that came before can also be seen as jigsaw pieces for the big Hellboy epic. More chapters of a much bigger story than standalone stories. On the other hand, it's of course true, because the whole first half of this collection is indeed a pretty straightforward story called The Conqueror Worm, with lots of Nazis, the ghost of Lobster Johnson, and a lot of other familiar characters with shorter or longer appearances, like Rasputin and the Baba Yaga. Back in 1939, the Nazis shot the corpse of a Nazi scientist into space as a bait for terrible monsters that somehow linger there, or to be more precise, the Okdru Yahat, the seven that are one, the serpent, the all-devastating worm. That worm has obviously taken the bait in space, and now, after all that time, the space capsule returns to Earth. Hence Hellboy, the homunculus Roger, and an Austrian lady go to Hunte castle in Austria, where the space capsule is expected to land. Not too surprising that there is already a bunch of undead Nazis also waiting their worm-filled comrade. The worm makes the Nazis turn into anthropomorphic frogs or frog-morphic humans. Pretty ugly creatures anyway. And it's easy to see that Mignola has set the stage right here for the BPRD arc about the plague of frogs, or the plague of frogs. But more about that in the next Mignola episode. And in another way, the stage is prepared for the BPRD series because Hellboy leaves the BPRD in the end of The Conqueror Worm. He is pissed because the bureaucrats of the BPRD had planted a bomb within Roger to prevent any uncontrolled outbursts. His comprehensible reaction to that is the question when they will put a bomb on him. Anyhow, Hellboy leaves the BPRD at the end, remotely similar like in the second Hellboy movie, but in the comic he leaves alone. And he leaves to Africa. The second story of the collection is called Strange Places and shows Hellboy's trip to Africa to find his true self, the truth of his existence. And he can't like all the bad foreshadowing that he stirs up. Every ghost and his mama tells him that he will be some kind of a means to the end of the world as we know it. Hellboy is pushed from one nightmarish situation into another in a plot that falls back to a more fragmented storytelling. Mignola mixes mysticism, occult legends, religious stuff, stories, and own innovations to a thick sauce of his very own brand. You find quotes from Moby Dick in here, as well as some references to the antique Aztecs, the Rosicrucians, and to Helena Petrovna Blavatsky, one of the most influential and demented esoterics ever. And on top of that, he uses some African folk tales that he uses to enrich his own story of the grandmother Borg Rouge or Rouge and her 3 fish daughters. By the way, a story Mignola plotted years before as a Submariner story. Anyhow, Strange Places could have easily been titled Hellboy in Africa, even though the art and the colors actually haven't changed in comparison to the previous storylines that took place in other parts of the world. Basically, and on the bottom line, what we can take out of Strange Places is the conclusion that Hellboy definitely has been warned about things to come. Without giving us too much of an actual story, Mignola rises our expectations for the next episodes of Hellboy, which have been done by other artists, because Mignola will not return to pencil duties before the last Hellboy in Hell arc. Like the previous library editions, we find a wealth of bonus material in the third volume as well. There's a very interesting afterword in which Mignola mentions that some of the apocalyptic undertones in the story can be explained to a certain extent with the fact that some parts of the story were done after 9/11. And even more interesting is his description of a writer's block he had in the wake of the first Hellboy movie. I quote, "Nothing against the movie, but, while true to the spirit of the comic, it was playing fast and loose with the details of the comic. It was creating a different, not radically different, but different mythology. And I was feeling the need to get my version of things, the, in quotes, real version, into print. Films are bigger than comics, I didn't say better. They reach a wider audience, and to a certain extent, when your thing is made into a film, you live in its shadow, which is fine. I just needed my audience to know that I was still going to do what I was going to do, not alter my thing to be more like the film." So, end quote. And last not least, we have unused pages, inked or just pencils, and a ton of sketches. Sketches, and even more sketches. Some pretty wild and interesting. Oh, yeah. All of them are interesting, of course. And all of them documenting the creative process behind these episodes of Hellboy. So that's for now. Thanks for listening and watching. Goodbye.